I bought another car from Copart for just $600, and this time it has a clean title. Believe it or not, it's also a pretty rare spec, so now we just have to figure out if I bought complete junk. Welcome to episode 1 of a new rebuild series. Now let's jump back to the past, to the windy day when I picked this up. So back at Copart, and this time it's not the one I intended to be at. It was supposed to be one that was an hour away, but we got mixed up, and it's actually the one that's 3 hours away. So what I got is a 2005 C230 Supercharged. Rear-wheel drive manual, supercharged. It's gonna be fun. Now, why was this car cheap? The answer is location. It was pretty far from major cities. It probably would have gone for a lot more if it were closer to a city. There's also some visual things that you'll see as we walk around. If you're wondering what makes this car rare, since, well, C-classes aren't, it's the spec. The manual transmission was most often ordered on the more basic two-door hatchback, at least in the US. A lot of what's available is the two-door hatchback with cloth and the manual transmission, so the combination of sport package, manual transmission, leather interior on a sedan is rare. And the car's home. Again, this is a 2005 C230K, which has a supercharged 1.8 liter 4-cylinder, and it runs like trash. And it might run like trash because instead of putting in the right battery in this car, someone went to Walmart and put in a battery. The car needs 900 cold cranking amps, and this battery only has 600. It doesn't even fit the battery tray, and it isn't even tied down. For size comparison, here's my hand, and looking at the battery that's the right spec is not the same. While we're pulling the battery out, you'll notice that this is the intake for the HVAC system. It's just open. I don't know why. There's supposed to be a filter and a battery cover here, and you can see the blower motor in there. So clearly, we're gonna have to take care of that at some point. Now in the engine bay, we can also see a worn out K&N filter that we'll need to clean. It's not secure, but I think the intake isn't mounted properly. The way it's set up right now, the intake pulls hot air in from right behind the radiator, which is not ideal. You can see the original intake path that pulls air in here and bridges this gap. We'll have to check and make sure they didn't leave the filter in here while having this here. But these are all things we can take care of later. There we go. To get the battery out, it's a lot easier with the hood in service position. On the driver's side, there's a red button on the strut. When you push it, it allows the strut to extend further, opening the hood more, which is a really convenient feature on Mercedes cars. The battery tray is a little bit rusty, but at least we found the tie down without its bolts. So as you can see, the correct battery is a fair bit bigger and it's a little bit harder to put in. An extra set of hands can be really helpful to keep the battery cables out of the way. One of the reasons we changed the battery out, besides the fact that it was dead, is that when we jumped the car, when we picked it up, we saw that the revs started to bounce around once we removed the jump pack. We'll find out soon enough if that was the only issue or not. We're also going to check the spark plugs to see what condition they're in and maybe get an idea of how the engine was running before it went to Copart. The first step for that is to remove the coils, which require e-torque sockets. There's 2 bolts per coil.
Okay, nice. Not crazy. The one thing you want to do with these e-sockets is make sure that it's properly seated before you start, because they can slip. It'll feel like it might be started, but it's not completely. And what I've done here is I've actually already broke them loose.
These are all Mercedes coils, which is nice, and it looks like they're in pretty good shape. You can also see it's a bit dirty in here, probably because the engine cover is missing, and over time dirt made its way past the seals on the coils into the spark plug holes, so we'll have to clean that up. Disconnecting the coils can be a little tedious for some of them, so just take your time and be careful. Remove the spark plugs using your favorite spark plug socket. Ours is magnetic, which is really nice. As you can see, the spark plug is kind of old, with a little bit of carbon buildup, but it looks pretty good. No weird signs on the first cylinder. And comparing with the brand new spark plug, you can see the electrode's worn a little bit, but not too bad. For cylinder 2, we see the same thing. When you're putting spark plugs in, it's a good idea to turn them counterclockwise first to make sure the threads are aligned correctly, because cross-threading plugs is something you definitely want to avoid. On this engine, iridium spark plugs are recommended, and that's actually what comes in it from the factory, so that's what our new ones are as well. Iridium spark plugs are more expensive, but they do last longer and provide a good spark. Another reason we're changing the spark plugs is that way, if we see any misfires later, we know it's not the plugs and it might be the coils. The carbon buildup we're seeing on these plugs could have been caused by the fuel that was used in this car's past. Premium gasoline will help reduce carbon buildup and avoid detonation in high compression engines. Mercedes does specify premium gas for this car, and that's usually recommended for anything with forced induction anyway, so that's what we'll be putting in from here on out. Cylinder 3 looks the same as 1 and 2.
I guess now would be a good time to also talk about the fact that we saw on the title of the car that the previous owner bought the car in February of 2022, or at least got the title, and it had the same exact amount of miles that it has now, so it sat.
And here's what the last spark plug looks like. With all the plugs started by hand, we're going to torque them to spec, which is 24 Newton meters. Now it's time to put the coils back in. We're putting them back into the cylinder they came off of, though we'll swap them around if we see a misfire on a specific cylinder. Here you can see this coil has some damage on the plug housing, but this shouldn't cause any issues for us. For cylinder 3, you can slide off this little module to make it a lot easier to access the connector. We'll start the coil mounting bolts by hand. We'll save some time by running them in with the power tool. And then we'll torque them to 8 Newton meters. Before we try starting the car up again, it's a good time to get this intake reconnected properly so it doesn't rattle around. With the intake removed, we can see the tab that wasn't inserted properly.
There it is.
There we go.
Oh, yeah.
Much better.
That's way better.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. And with some fresh gas in the tank, let's find out if we've solved our issues. It idles kind of okay. But things aren't right when we rev it. What's really weird is that even with the engine running this bad, we aren't getting a check engine light, which was unexpected. Even looking at live data on our scan tool with the engine running doesn't give us any hints. We're not even seeing misfiring. If you have an idea of what the issue is, let me know in the comments. The last thing you can try for now is to scan all the systems to see if there are any other indicators. So here's the faults we're getting. Just everything. So this is except that. However, since the battery was so low, some of these are probably stored codes, so we're gonna do a quick erase. Now we're back after doing the quick erase, and there's still some codes left, so let's start with the ESP. Overvoltage, ECM not identified or that's stored. Fault in CAN, TCM. Overvoltage, voltage too low. So we're gonna clear these codes now because they're probably all there because the battery that we just took out was really flat, and that causes all sorts of problems. Okay. Overhead control panel. Roof system not normalized. So this error message isn't actually a big deal. It's most likely that the sunroof needs to be recalibrated so it knows where the fully open position is and where the vented position is. So we'll take care of that later. But what this does mean is that there aren't any issues with any of the modules, so We gotta find out what's actually going on with this engine. And that's it for this video. Next time, we'll find out, was I able to fix it? Am I just gonna clean it up and sell it? Am I about to load this on the trailer and bring it to the scrapyard? You'll have to subscribe to find out. If you think you know what's wrong with this car, let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, or if you like seeing me mess around with cheap European cars, be sure to leave a like. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.